Hello, my name's Jason. I'm glad you're here. This video is part 2 of a 4-part series on Philemon. We're covering context, structure, language, and intertext. Today, we'll look at the structure of Paul's letter and what it means for the overall message. Back in the days when this letter was written, there was a structure commonly followed for a personal letter. Today, we call it the Hellenistic letter. Super basic. 3 parts. The first is the letter opening. This contains some general information like sender, receiver, as well as some well-wishing. Then the letter body, comprised of the actual content of the letter or what the letter is all about. Then the letter closing, which would include third-party greetings and more well-wishing. Now, Paul's letter fits this model perfectly, so there's no doubt that this is what it is. However, is that all that it is? The answer is no. It's much more. So let's dig into part 2 and the brilliance behind the structure of Paul's letter to Philemon. We know from his other writings that Paul is fond of a literary device called a chiasm. This is taken from the Greek letter chi, which looks like an X. The idea is to draw the attention to the center. So one would start with point A and point B and then reach the main point C and then reverse the order out from C to B to A. This would emphasize to the reader the main point. There are many variations to this technique, all kinds of shapes and sizes, ranging from just a couple of verses to entire books. But for this study, the letter to Philemon follows the most basic scheme in 5 points. A, B, C, D, E, D, C, B, A. Let me show you how it works. First, we take the letter as a whole and divide it into sections. This is done by simply reading slowly and carefully and paying attention to where the author changes focus. When done right, each section will retain a sense of congruency. For example, here in the first section, you can sense a breath being taken between verse 3 and verse 4. The salutation finishes and an encouragement begins. Likewise, the next section is distinguished from the previous one by the use of for this reason or therefore. It's another shift, another breath. On throughout the letter, we end up with 9 distinct sections. Then the fun begins as similarities emerge within each section's counterpart. For example, the first and last sections both contain a very curious inverted double reference, Jesus Christ and Christ Jesus. A definite clue for the reader to be aware of a possible chiasm. So we label both these sections as A. The rest of the section follows suit. B, we see a connection between my prayers and your prayers having the same effect of refreshing for Paul. Next, in C, we find the prep for an appeal, then the actual appeal, as well as Paul reaffirming his authority by reminding Philemon of authorship. I, Paul, here, and I, Paul, here. D, these two focus on the transformation of Onesimus that is possible if Paul's letter is heeded. So from separated to have him back will change Onesimus from useless to useful and of service, from a slave to a brother. Which brings us to the last phrase, represented here in the letter E. If this is a true chiasm, it would mean that in this phrase lies the main purpose of the letter. And as we read it, I'm convinced that it is. But I prefer to do nothing without your consent, in order that your good deed might be voluntary and not something forced. Paul has put a lot of effort in crafting this letter to make this particular phrase pop. All of a sudden, the main point is not about Onesimus at all. It's about how will Philemon respond now that Onesimus has been sent back? Will he give in to the temptation to wield his power over Onesimus and seek retribution? Or will he remember that he too was once unforgivable and the mercy of Christ welcomed him home? Paul doesn't just want Philemon to forgive Onesimus. He wants Philemon to desire reconciliation. That is what the structure of Philemon shows us. That Paul wants Philemon to participate in living out the gospel. Because Paul knows we're never more like Jesus than when we're forgiving people that don't deserve it. And that'll preach.